Good morning. It is Sunday, the 11th of January, and this is my outlook for the week ahead. Okay, so this week we have a couple of important things happening. We have some inflation data out on Tuesday, and I think the key thing is actually going to be the tariffs decision, which is on Wednesday this week. So a couple of things to keep an eye on. I think the tariff thing is probably potentially the more important in terms of market reaction. Okay, so we'll just take a quick look at the Nasdaq. So we've been balancing here for October, November, December, and all of January so far. On Friday, we've had an attempt, or started to have an attempt, to push out of value. And the question is this going to be a genuine break, or is this just, are we just putting in a local high here, potentially into this area of consolidation before we re-accept into value and rotate lower again? Personally, I'm skeptical that we're going to break out. There are a few reasons for that. Primarily stage of cycle, but we've seen a lot of rotation within equities at the moment, which is kind of quite late cycle behavior. So I'm skeptical that we see, a significant break. Yes, we could probably go for the highs, but I'm not sure that this is going to be like a sustained move that you would expect from a multi-month breakout. So I'm leaning towards mean reversion. It's just how much higher this actually ends up going. But that's kind of somewhat neither here nor there. I just think it's very risky to assume that this is just going to break and run. We are late in the cycle. Liquidity seems to have peaked, and therefore I'm sort of expecting it to fail somewhere between 26k and perhaps taking out the high. So we'll see how that develops on the Nasdaq. It's quite an interesting situation. I don't really want to go over anything else on the equity side. Not really markets I'm particularly focused on at the moment. So Bitcoin. Quite disappointing, I would say. So, I think after this breakout early in the month and the retest here, there was every chance that we could have rallied towards these previous year and previous quarters VWAPs, having held above the previous year and previous quarters value low. Now, as it happens, we have 2 months of overlapping value here. So November and December is overlapping. So this is the 2-month volume composite, value high, value low, and we more or less had a failure at the 2-month composite high. So that itself is a bearish development. We've now also got 8 weeks of overlap from the 16th of November to this week. We've re-accepted within the 8 week and failed to break above it again on Friday. Right, had a pretty big attempt on Friday, having squeezed out some shorts at this low. And failed there as well. So this is a bearish development, and this is also a bearish development. So I would say the most recent shift is bearish, and given both of these failures, so the failure here would point to a price attempting to traverse value back towards 86k, and the failure here implies re-acceptance within value, and I would therefore assume that we try and attempt to traverse value back to 86k. So for me, everything is pointing back towards this 86k area, and we're just playing this range, right? We're just playing ping pong between the extremes of value for the time being, and everything between is kind of noise and quite choppy. Now, that's not to say it has to happen, but we should expect that, right? We should expect an attempt to push lower. The other thing that's kind of interesting, the point of control of this range is really, really close to the value low. It's also pretty much lining up with previous year and previous quarters val. We have some inefficiency here as well at the 86k level in the form of this imbalance. Okay, so we've tagged into it, but we haven't filled out the whole imbalance here. So that lines up again with that 2-month composite low. So are we going to see this week an attempt to go towards 86k? I think that's my current expectation, unless we can get a clear break to start with above 91,800, which is the 8-week composite high. So given this development and this development, I'm leaning towards rotation toward 86k. I was much too late to flip my bias, to be honest. Didn't really expect that this was going to be such significant resistance. Took the long here, round trip some of it. I haven't really traded Bitcoin particularly brilliantly this week. I've had more success with alts, to be honest. But yeah, so what now? I mean, look, we have the typical sort of Friday, Saturday, Sunday composite structure here. A high volume node at 91.2 which lines up with previous month value high and the monthly VWAP. So if we should get a spike into that area today, potentially that's where I'd be looking to position on Bitcoin to get into a short. If we get a rejection off that HVN. Other than that, there's nothing really to do on BTC for me right now. I think if you I took a short here on Friday, closed it out. We came into that 91.2 level, which is the sort of evolving composite low here. But I don't love this composite structure. I don't think it's particularly important. I think the most important level right now is this high volume node. And then to the downside, we have this 8-week composite high, which sits back from early last year, which is still being respected, right? That's where we came into on Thursday, bottom there. So I think that's kind of support for the time being. If we don't get the spike into here, which would be kind of typical for a Sunday, a little pump into resistance, then you're really just looking to trade potentially the 17 days of value. So if we get a reacceptance into there, potentially there's sort of an intraday setup to play value through here, maybe taking some off at the POC. I think it could be quite a choppy week. I don't necessarily expect that we're going to see a break in either direction from this range anytime soon. Really, I still think this is going to be a good long down here. Even if it doesn't break to the upside, I still think this is a good area to be looking for longs. We're just continuing to play value until it breaks. So just expecting more of the same. But given this failure and this reacceptance, I think the expectation should be that we see price continuing to push lower until we get a change. So what could that change look like? If I just grab the last few days of value. It's going to look like shit on TradingView, but okay, so we're just building out this range. If we get a clear reacceptance above, well, really it has to be 91.8, okay, because that's the 8-week composite high, which is acting as resistance. For now, the multi-day composite high is lining up with that kind of high volume node. So I think this is a pretty big area of resistance just above 91k. This is probably where you want to be looking to get short, in my opinion. So we're looking for a short there. If we break above 91.8, then I change my bias. But yeah, personally still expecting an attempt to push towards 86k, basically. I think that sums it up on BTC. Now, if we just come over to VWAP quickly. So my expectation based on VWAP was really that we would, try and push towards previous years at 99k, which lines up with the previous quarter. So the question now is, can we deviate below that level, perhaps fill out that imbalance, reclaim, and then go for it? Or are we just going to continue to get capped around previous, or rather November's value high, which is more or less, November's VWAP rather here, which has capped us so far to the upside. The weekly at the moment is looking relatively bearish. VWAP's been pointing down most of the week. It's kind of neutralized a bit, but we're trading below value low. So I still think that, if we're unable to get a strong close this week, then most likely that this is pointing towards a bearish change after a bullish start to the year. On the year opened up, we got above weekly VWAP, traded up. New week, started to develop more bearishly, right? So for all of these reasons, I think this area around 91k is pretty obvious key resistance for the time being, and we're likely to rotate towards 86. Okay, so I don't think it makes sense to sort of have a very strong directional bias until we see a break from this range. I'm starting to have doubts as to whether we are actually going to go towards this 100k area. The reason being is that we're forming multiple months of value here, and typically when that value breaks, you tend to see trend continuation. I personally don't think we're going to see trend continuation to the upside, and therefore, the probability of us coming into here is starting to diminish a bit for me. That's not to say it can't happen, of course. We could easily come up here, reaccept, and just print another month of overlap. It's just starting to have some doubts about it. But as I said, I still think this is going to be a great area to look for a long if we come into here, assuming we can then get back above this POC. Right, that's the key. We don't want to spend too much time down here. I want to see it quickly bought up, get back above that point of control, and then at least I'd be targeting back towards the value highs and potentially for that continuation towards 100k area. Okay, that's it for Bitcoin. I mean, Ether, I just haven't really been looking at it, so I feel a bit silly just commenting. We'll take a look at Solana. I've been trading this a bit more actively. So Sol, let's take away the TPO stuff for now. Okay, so we have, it becomes 4 hour. 4 weeks of overlap here, which has been well respected. So, you know, this old, very old now, 8-month composite low was respected. We had a good few days or a couple of weeks of value down here, broke that, reclaimed the 4 weeks, right? Nice reclaim, nice retest and traversal, right? So really clean trading around that 4-week composite up to value highs. Since then, we just started to balance. So let's zoom into this more recent price action. So on Friday, well, it's clearer if I actually bring the TPO back, assuming it's kept. Yep, it has. So we have a multi-day composite formed. It's about a week from the 6th of Jan. Friday we had a nice trap into the composite lows, took that long up towards composite highs, shorted, back towards the composite lows, and now just waiting, right? So I think it's still rotational, but we're sort of compressing it over the weekend into composite lows. We're below the broader composite POC at 138, back below previous month value high as well, and below the 7-day rolling VWAP again. So I'm thinking similar to BTC, we've had an attempt to break out, a return into value, retest here. Are we going to, complete the rotation back through value towards 130, and possibly even the broader composite? So 130 is a nice level, right? It's clearly a nice low volume node here. It's kind of not the most normal distribution. We've got confidence in the form of the 30-day previous quarter's val, previous month VWAP. So I do think 130 is an important level. However, are we going to see full traversal back towards this 126 level, which is the volume composite low? I think either of those is most likely at the moment. I wouldn't get bullish now unless we broke 141, which is the volume and most recent multi-day composite high, essentially. So yeah, leaning towards more downside on Solana, probably a bit of a spike into perhaps this composite point of control around 138. So that's potentially a good area to look for a short. But I think a move back towards 130 and possibly 126 is most likely for Sol. A bit tricky now because we are trading at support in the form of this composite low. So maybe the safest setup, if you wanted to be more conservative, would be to look to coming back. Let me just get rid of these drawings. So possible short if we get a spike into this area. The broader POC, I'd probably expect it to cap price. Weekly VWAP, 7-day VWAP. Alternatively, for the short, wait for it to break down and then potentially give a retest of this high volume node and the composite low, lining up around 136. Two possibilities. And then I would say bullish above sort of 140, 141 area. In that case, I'd probably target that 150 level, which is the imbalance I've been looking at for some time. Yeah, so that's it for Sol. I guess we pretty much covered everything I wanted to talk about, mostly in terms of outlook. I'll just go over quickly this Pippin trade, because I think it's quite a nice one. So just, purely from a sort of really simple market structure perspective, we had a low here, a big attempt, a huge rejection. Okay, so I think, reasonable to assume that's a long-term top on the basis that we've got this huge wick, at least on Bybit, up to 80 cents all the way down to 50. So, bled out, a lot of fresh positioning here. I think I took a short here from memory. close it out. Right, then a lower low here. So, my assumption has been, we're going to make a lower high somewhere. So I've been looking for shorts. I took one around this area earlier in the week. Then we had this flat-topped candle on the 4 hour, right, which we swept into. So I was looking at this on Friday, and clearly forming some sort of range here, big spikes into the highs. So some sign that the seller is standing in the way of price here, and that perhaps it's in a phase of distribution. So I started to take a short on Friday. Then yesterday, I don't have much data for this coin, which is kind of a bit of a disadvantage. But yesterday, right, so we re-accepted within the previous day's value, fine, and not much going on throughout the day. Had a bit of a push into the previous day's value high, and here is where really start to see quite clear exhaustion in the flows. So just running out of buyers into those highs. Clearly some absorption happening here as well. So this is where I took the short. Initial puke. A lot of delta into that low. Bit of reversion into VWAP, and then we've just continued down. So it's a really nice short here. I think this could probably just continue going significantly lower now, making a new low. The other thing I would say about this one that was quite clean is that we had this high volume node here. So we deviated above it in the end. I don't know why I've got this weird angle thing, it doesn't really matter. So there's a high volume node from this consolidation, right, deviated above. Once we got back below, retested, it could have even taken it here. But yeah, I would assume that now that we continue, go lower. We had a decent reaction almost off previous quarter's value high to the tick here last week. So I think we're probably making a new low, next contextual level, previous month value low. It'd be nice if we could see that. It's a nice 50% move down from here, but this is the kind of coin that's going to pull those kind of moves. So hence why I was so keen to at least attempt to short it. So just wanted to go over that trade. What else? Fartcoin, let's quickly look, because I think there's a potentially good short setup here. It seems to be forming a bit of a range. So we had a high yesterday, just front ran this high volume node, naked point control from this 2 days consolidation. So are we forming another distribution here? I think it's quite likely that we are. So if we can take out yesterday's high into this naked point of control, potentially I'd be looking for a short there. I mean, look, it could be a lower high here, it could be done. I would prefer to see this. Maybe we get some confluence in the form of the anchored VWAP from the top. I think I've just done that on a different time frame. Let me just re-anchor it. If we can remember where it is, there it is. Yeah. So maybe we get some confluence in the form of the testing that anchored from the high, but we've got a nice high volume node here. Not the best high yesterday, actually better one today. So I think we could clean that up into that NPOC, and then potentially traverse through this previous 3 weeks of value back to previous quarter's VWAP. That would take out this low. I think that would be a nice trade. So that's one I'm looking to take today. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now, I think. I'm short virtual, still just ranging, but quite clear excess positioning into the composite highs. Not to say it has to roll over yet. I think if we merge that, it's clearer. Yeah. So, this developing comp high, more or less tagged. Not to say it couldn't make another attempt, but I think it's a nice thin high volume move into, one-sided high volume move into the composite highs. There was enough confidence there for me to at least attempt the short, and I would target back towards this consolidation around previous month value high in the 30-day, assuming it breaks down. So we'll see how that one goes. Oh yeah, and Useless. That was also a nice short yesterday. This one does have some data, weirdly. I think I've probably said enough today, but let's just quickly look at it. Okay, so with Useless, so we'd lost the 7-day VWAP here, and then we got this push back into it, right? So back into the imbalance. So there's a nice price action set up alone, and then just looking at the positioning. So we'd already seen open interest RSI divergences across these highs on the 4 hour, and then quite a clear excessive positioning into that high against adverse books. So yeah, I got positioned around, just as it started to roll over essentially. Pretty aggressive puke, so took profit, but I think, most likely that's probably a lower high in here, just retesting, and then probably we go towards this area of support. We'll see. I'll leave it there for today, and speak to you next time. Was there anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so. Catch you next time. Cheers.